Hey, this is Seagrove, and today I'm here with PokePop, who is one of the leaders on the rules team, and as much as I understand it. Um, why don't you introduce yourself to us and tell us about your role on the rules team and what the rules team is and what that means?
Okay, sure. So I'm Michael Martin. Uh, the rules team is basically a combination of Team Compendium and research and development from Pokemon, the Pokemon Company. So uh, the Team Compendium has been collecting. We started off by collecting the rules that Wizards of the Coast made in their weekly chats going back to the early days. They actually had a weekly chat where people would talk with them about new things that were going on and ask them questions and they'd give out answers, but then there was no resource for collecting all that. So there was this one guy who put it together to start, but he quickly realized he wasn't going to be able to maintain it.
Okay.
So myself and a few other people, Big Daddy Snorlax, who basically runs Worlds and is the lead judge for Worlds and Nationals every year. Kim Carey, Timon Martindale, Chris Boucher, and we had some other people at the beginning back when we first got started. But we basically curated all those rulings into the compendium. And Wizards of the Coast liked what we were doing to the point where when they started up their community boards, they had us run it for them.
Okay.
And when Wizards of the Coast lost their license, they let us keep the name and the artwork, and we kept that running along with the compendium. We always kept ownership of the compendium.
Okay.
And when Pokemon took over, we basically got in front of them and said, "Hey, we were doing this for Wizards. We'd like to do it for you too." So we kept on basically keeping all the rules, and we worked with R&D to basically anything that's published in that ruling book. It's a great resource for judges. Is approved by R&D, and if R&D feels the need, they go to Japan and get the ruling from Japan.
Okay.
So everything that's in that compendium is approved by Pokemon as an official ruling. And they also have us answering questions on the Ask the Rules team on PokeGym.net and also on the professor boards on Pokemon.com. So any of those answers on those forums are official, and we basically work with them on a weekly basis to get out rulings that are official for things that come up that everyone has questions about.
Okay. What's R&D?
Research and development.
Oh, okay.
So yeah. So there's organized play. Yeah. So a lot of people don't realize there's a whole bunch of divisions within Pokemon. Most people are familiar with the organized play, who basically get out the tournaments and help people run the tournaments. But research and development is a little bit more of a background group that helps design the cards, helps translate the cards, make sure that the translations are correct, that things are worded properly, and helps us with getting the rulings out.
Okay. Very cool. So, PokePop has an amazing YouTube channel. I'm going to link that down below in the description. So check that out. It's a really good resource for judges. Some complex things, some uh, important tips from experienced judges, etc. So definitely check that out. But
Yeah, I try to not just have it focused completely for judges, but also to put some content in there for the regular player. So here's some things for the regular player that they need to know that'll help them when they're interacting with judges.
awesome. Yeah, so that'll be linked below in the description. Um, but what other resources are there for new judges, especially?
So I'd say there's three main resources. Well, four, but if we're talking online, number one, if you go on the Pokemon.com website, and let me just jump to it real quick here so that I can pull it up to tell people exactly where to go. So once you're on the Pokemon.com website, up in the top corner, there's the green box, Play Pokemon Events, and if you click on that, it'll bring you to their web page, which most people use the find an event from there when you're searching for an event. But if you look at the other sections that are in there, One of the sections is called "Learn About Play Pokemon."
Okay.
Here, let me bring it up to the camera. Oh, there it is.
Okay.
Learn about Play Pokemon. With the Play Pokemon icon there.
Awesome.
And if you go into there, there's on the sidebar rules and resources. So in the rules and resources section, there's all the tournament documents the Pokemon publishes, and they update them on a regular basis. It has all the rules, it has the penalty guidelines. All of those things are very important for potential judges and players really to know. It goes over exactly what makes a deck legal, what makes sleeves legal, when is a deck considered to be marked, goes through all those things. So
Okay.
that's a tremendous resource. The next good resource I mentioned previously about the compendium. So on pokegym.net, if you go to our main page, there's a little sidebar over on the right hand side, compendium. And if you go there, you'll get to that official document that has all officially recognized rulings, tournament rulings. So any large tournament or any small tournament which is run by a judge who knows what he's doing uses those rulings to basically have a consistent experience for the players, not only across the country but around the world.
Okay.
Then there's also the forums. I mentioned the Ask the Rules Team forum on pokegym.net, or the professor uh, the professor forums on the Pokemon.com website, but you have to be a professor to gain access to
Right.
that. But either of those two forums, you can ask rulings questions, and myself or somebody else will answer them. And any question that's answered in those forums is considered an official tournament binding ruling.
Okay.
If we're not sure of the answer, we don't answer it.
Okay.
So if we do answer it, it's an official answer. The other really important resource are experienced judges in your area. It's a little hard for somebody to come in from nowhere and on their own without working with anyone else to learn to be a good judge.
Mm-hmm.
It can be done, but it's a lot better if you learn best practices from the people in your area who are doing things right. And if it means volunteering at an event, you know, if they already have a staff, say, hey, I just want to volunteer so I can help out, so I can learn. You don't have to pay me if they have a full staff already, just to gain the experience, because doing that can really uh, boost how good you are.
For sure.
Doing things on your own, like I said, it can be done, but it's a lot harder, and some people go off in really strange directions thinking how things should be done.
Yeah. Okay, and for those resources you mentioned, I'm also going to link those in the description below. So just go down there and you'll find all this stuff. Very cool. So if I'm a new judge, I think you may have already mentioned this, but what's the first thing I need to do? Because a lot of people, they sort of feel like they're thrown out into the middle of the ocean without a raft. Like,
Right.
congratulations, you're a judge, and that's it.
Right. Well, one of the things we also have on pokegym.net is access to the judge judge training manual. It was something that was put together. Kim Carey led the putting that together, but it was put together with input from top judges and top organizers around the world, literally. And we're actually editing now to update it because it hasn't been updated for a few years. But
Okay.
that particular document, so even though it's a little bit dated now, the core information that's in that document is still exceedingly good advice on what a judge needs to learn and how they should go about things. So I highly recommend going through that document. In addition to learning, what the rules are and how cards work and what penalties are and all that, the first step to do, like I said, is work with the people in your area. You can't expect to step out first time as a judge and be a judge at a regional championship. You're going to be starting at your local shop. There may be someone who's already a judge there, and like I said, they may not need the help. But if you position it that, I'm here to learn, and if you'll take me under your wing, I'd like to learn. If they're a good judge, they'll be happy to do that. So that's really the best way to start off.
Okay, very cool. Um, what's the most common mistakes you see new judges make, or one of the most common mistakes you see newer judges make?
Um, what I see some judges, well, there's a couple of things. One, judges, if they're an experienced judge from another game, they tend to try to apply some the way things are done or some particular way the game works from that other game to Pokemon.
Mm-hmm.
And in some cases that can work, but in other cases they're just two different games. And for example, Pokemon has no stack, whereas Magic the Gathering and Yu-Gi-Oh, the stack is very important. So the order things get resolved is very set. In Pokemon, it's much more Wild West of a lot of, if things are happening at the same time, the person it's happening to gets to choose the order. And even if a Pokemon gets knocked out in there, if later on you're healing that Pokemon, well, that healing happens, and now when you're checking the knockout at the very end, he doesn't have enough hit points to be knocked out. So there's some things like that that get misapplied by beginning judges. The other thing that I highly recommend to judges, you'll see some judges that have the attitude of I'm the judge, I'm the authority, what I
Mm-hmm.
say goes, and that's the end of it. That's not the good way to judge. The proper way to judge is you are the authority. However, you're an authority who is opening to learning new things and having your previous thoughts corrected if needed.
Mm-hmm.
So it's important to what we call team judge. And if you have multiple judges at an event, you want to consult on important rulings. If you don't have somebody you can consult with at an event, it's good to have somebody you can call. Um, I'm on the rules team, but I have two or three people that I call for advice on rulings, and everyone should have people that they can
Yeah.
call to get advice. That's because the most important thing is to get the ruling correct for the player, not to say this is the ruling and that's what I said it is and that's what it is and it's never going to change because I said that's what it is. It's important that we get it right for the players because number one, we want the players to have a consistent experience from one event to another, and number two, the players are playing for points toward the world championship. They're investing a lot into this game. They deserve to get the proper outcome for what is happening on the board.
Okay. One thing that seems to be a lack of understanding in the difference between major and minor gameplay errors, especially among
Hmm.
new judges. What's
Okay.
what? Do you have a rule of thumb, or how can you know the difference between those?
Yeah, basically, there's the continuum is so you have the game state, and if the game state is correct, everybody's happy, everything's good, yay, let's move on. Um, so a mistake happens, and now the question is how badly has that mistake damaged the game state? So you have some mistakes that you can say, oh, this happened, but it was caught almost immediately, and we can put the cards back and the game state back to where it should have been, exactly the way it should have been, and so now there's no damage to the game state. So that would be minor.
Okay.
Then you have there's damage to the game state. We can fix it pretty much, but not perfectly. Maybe the deck had to be shuffled. Maybe uh, some game action took place that happened before the fix happened, but we can't rewind that game action. So maybe the player would have wanted to choose a different game action, but that game action has to stand because we can't rewind it. But the
Okay.
game is in good enough shape that we can continue to play. So that would be there's some damage to the game state, but it's playable. So that would be game state major. The
Okay.
next thing we go to is the game state is so severely damaged that you cannot continue to play the game because it's just not, it's so badly damaged that it really has no meaning to continue playing that game.
Okay.
And that's when you get to your game state severe with a game loss. penalty attached to it. And you can have between the game state and major, which usually is a prize loss, if it's a lot of damage but not so much that it leads completely to a game loss. There's an interim penalty there of what they call a multi-prize penalty,
Right.
where the opponent can draw up to 3 prizes. So it's kind of like, yeah, it's really badly damaged, but we're going to continue play anyway. But to recognize that it's really badly damaged, you're
Okay.
getting multi-prize penalty.
Okay. Very cool. Thank you. And another one, de-escalating and escalating. When should you be de-escalating? When should you be escalating? Are there any meaningful non-examples, like times when people might
Hmm.
tend to de-escalate, but you shouldn't, or tend to escalate and they shouldn't?
Right. So generally speaking, the judge should be sticking with the penalty guidelines as much as possible. There are occasions where I have either escalated or de escalated, and the rule of thumb that I use is if I'm going to do something different than what the penalty guidelines say to do, I should be willing and able to stand in front of Dave Schwimmer and explain why I'm making the change that I'm making.
Okay.
And I literally have done that on multiple occasions when I've changed the either escalated or de-escalated at the worlds or national championships. So in game terms, basically, if you're seeing repeat offenses where somebody has done something and they've gotten a penalty, and that might be a minor penalty, and they're doing it again, maybe they're doing it again, at some point that needs to be escalated because the standard penalty is not working. And Pokemon is actually, in the case of slow play, has actually updated the guidelines where they want slow play escalated almost immediately. So there's
Yeah.
the initial penalty, and then the next penalty, if it happens again, they want that escalated right away.
Okay.
So previously, a lot of judges had been, just giving the warning, 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 and not escalating, and therefore not addressing slow play, which has been annoying a lot of players. So Pokemon is making it very clear they want that penalty escalated. Another example that they just made a change to recently with the draw an extra card. So you've played an N, and instead of drawing 5 cards, you drew 6 because you forgot that you had taken a prize. Previously, that was a caution or a warning depending on the level of event, and not necessarily escalated. Or even if it was escalated, just the initial penalty was a caution or a warning. They've just changed that now to where at low tier events it's a warning, and at higher tier events, regionals and above, it's a prize penalty. And you could make the argument, going back to what I said earlier about the game state, well, if we discovered the extra card was drawn right away and we're shuffling it back in, and it's the rest of the game state is clear, maybe that should be de-escalated to a minor and only give a warning rather than a prize penalty because the damage to the game state is so negligible.
Right.
That's an example where a judge should not de-escalate because Pokemon is basically giving that penalty as a de-incentive to players to make sure that they don't draw that extra card because it has been such a problem. They want more than a slap on the wrist. They want to have some bite to the penalty to make sure that we stop getting these extra cards drawn. So that would be one where you wouldn't want to de-escalate. Now, where might you want to de-escalate? Generally, you'd want to de-escalate with a brand new player who's making multiple mistakes, but they're making multiple mistakes because they're not familiar with being in a tournament.
Right.
This is going to be more at a local event than at a high-level regional event, or with a junior player. Now, I also caution judges to not de-escalate automatically with juniors because a lot of juniors, especially the experienced juniors who have been playing a lot and have a lot of championship points, they know what they're doing.
Right.
And just as there is some shady playing in the Masters and the seniors, I hate to say it, but there's some shady play in the juniors as well. And if we automatically always de-escalate with the juniors, those shady players get away with things.
Yeah.
And we do want to be mindful with juniors of, when it is an inexperienced player, they're going to be making more mistakes,
Sure.
and we may de-escalate with those. But if it's a seasoned player who should know how to play properly, and you have evidence that they know how to play properly because they hit top cuts in a lot of events, they should not be de-escalated because they've shown that they're a player who should be able to play at the caliber of a large event, and whether they're doing it on purpose or not, they should still be held to the standard of the type of player that they are, which is a good, experienced player.
All right. Well, that's a really good segue into our last segment here. What our cheating is, I want to say it's a hot topic right now, but really it's sort of regularly a hot topic, or always maybe a hot topic. So,
Right.
in terms of dealing with cheating, instead of asking for judges, because that's laid out pretty clearly in some of the resources you mentioned, why or how can players help judges
Hmm.
with finding and I don't know if they have any room to go on beyond that, but how can players help
Right.
judges recognize cheating?
Well, you mentioned about calling judges, and I'll actually say that we want players to call judges more than they do. Um, One of the things that kills us more than anything is after an event when we hear, "Oh, this happened and that happened," and
Right.
I caught him doing this, and I stopped him, but I didn't call the judge. Well, gee, that's exactly when you should call the judge because we've got them. We've got evidence. And even if we're not necessarily going to pull the trigger on that particular evidence, that evidence plus the next time we'll be able to pull the trigger on somebody.
Mm-hmm.
But if we never get called and we never get the evidence, and then we hear afterwards about how so and so is cheating all during the tournament, I can't do anything about it now. I need to be brought over then, and so that would be what I really would want players to do is to bring the judges over, even if we can't pull the trigger on calling on making a cheating ruling at that point in time. It's evidence toward being able to do that, and we get a few bits of those evidences and we can put it together, and then we can pull the trigger on saying, okay, this person's been cheating. But if we never get those bits of evidence, we never get to put them together. Um, the other thing that I highly recommend players do is always, always, always cut your opponent's deck and potentially give it a short little shuffle. Um, we 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 want players to do riffle or smash shuffles, but a lot of players do, the Hindu shuffle or the Japanese shuffle, as some people call it. Some players are really good at manipulating cards so they turn up at the top or bottom of the deck.
Right.
If you don't cut or give a little shuffle as you have the right to do, then there's an opportunity for players who can do that kind of thing to get a card where they want it to do. The other thing I recommend when you do cut is vary where you cut. If you're playing a cheater and you are always cutting very close to the bottom of the deck, then they'll be able to say, "Oh, I want to set my cards at the bottom of the deck so those cards are showing up at the top." Or wherever you're going to
Right.
set to normally, they're going to be able to manipulate the cards to go where you're going to cut to normally. So you want to vary. Sometimes you cut near the top, sometimes the bottom, sometimes you do a bit of a shuffle. Whatever you're going to do, if you're always varying what you're doing, that's going to make it for somebody hard to manipulate cards and get them placed where they want them placed. So that's an important thing to do. The other thing to do is to keep an eye on your opponent's discard pile, right? That's um, an important thing where people, there's cards in the discard pile. Unfortunately, the default place to put the discard pile is close to the edge of the table, which makes it easy to gain access to those cards if somebody is not paying attention. So if you keep an eye on what cards should be in your opponent's discard pile and suddenly a card that you think should be in the discard pile is not there, call a judge over. If you can say, hey, there should be a rare candy in the discard pile. It's not. And we find a rare candy in his hand. Then we can do something about it.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
those are the kind of things that can help us to get cheating out of this game.
Okay. I have a personal experience here. I'm gonna give it to you, and these are things I've heard other people say as well. So I was playing against somebody who was first thing I see is he's shuffling and sort of has his deck where he can see what the bottom card is while he's shuffling.
Yeah.
At that moment, should I call a judge or should I say, "Hey, can you turn your deck so you can't see the bottom card?"
Now, in this particular case, did you identify the card? Could you see what that card was yourself?
Yes.
Okay, so if you call over a judge and you can say, hey, he's got a rare candy on the bottom of his deck, and I was able to identify that because he was shuffling in a way that he could see the bottom of his deck, and therefore I could see it as well. And we look at the bottom of the deck and there's a rare candy there. I'd be highly likely to issue a penalty on that.
Okay.
Yeah, I would like to issue penalties on those kind of things because, to be honest, it's very hard for a judge to see that kind of shuffling because in order for us to see it, we'd either have to be standing right above the person doing the shuffling and looking straight down, or we'd have to be behind the opponent getting the view from the opponent, and if we're standing right there, the person's not going to do it because they see us standing right there.
Okay.
So it's really hard and so if we're off on the side, we can't see that. So it's really something we need the opponent to help us to catch because otherwise we just can't see it.
Okay. After that, eventually I came to the conclusion that he was indeed stacking and possibly doing other things. But anyways, and I wanted to call a judge, but I didn't. This was a while ago, and I think I would have now. But at the time I didn't because he had won game one. And I was worried that if I called a judge, I would lose time, and then I wouldn't be able to tie it up, and then that would be it.
Yeah. Well, if you ask a judge when you're starting on a ruling, say, hey, this might take a while. Can you note the time?
Okay.
That can help us to make sure that we're going to give an extension on a ruling if we're aware that this is not going to be a quick, what does this card do ruling.
Okay.
So that might help with that.
All right. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate it, and hopefully we can get out some of this information to newer judges. Do you have any shout-outs or plugs that you'd like to give?
Well, I hadn't thought about that. No, just like I said, we're doing a revamp of the PokeGym.net website. It's still in progress. A lot of the resources that we have on there, we're planning on expanding. It's going to be aimed. There's a lot of websites out there right now giving a lot of content for players, so our focus is more resources for judges. But we're planning on doing some articles which people will get paid for, which we haven't done in the past. So hopefully we can get some more life going back into the site. The site's been around for 15 more than 15 years, 16 years, pretty much since day one of when Pokemon started. So we want to make sure that we keep that as a good resource for both players and judges.
Very cool. Well, thank you very much. And again, all these resources he's mentioned are going to be in the description below. Thank you so much for your time, and see you guys.
Okay, thanks a lot.